Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Love and Law Live. My name is Virginia Warren. I'm a legal conflict alchemist and co-founder of the organisation called Lawyers for Love. At Lawyers for Love, we see that the legal prison, the legal the legal system in its present form uses fear-based techniques to solve problems. It says, love thy neighbour, else we will punish you. It acts as if you still need a parent. Lawyers for Love say to solve a problem, you need a higher level of consciousness than that which was used to create the conflict. That consciousness is based in love, and love says, love thy neighbour, and if you can't, we'll show you how. It's a method of self-regulation rather than parenting. This is what we call love is of the essence consciousness, or LEOTech for short. In these live broadcasts, we're showcasing lawyers globally who are amazingly bringing in their own unique style of love into legal practice. And today, it's my great pleasure to speak with the extraordinary lawyer who also gentles wild mustangs. I love that, gentles rather than tames, or they love that word. Jo Belasco. Jo works with law in two places. One is her law firm, Windhorse Legal, and the other is her nonprofit, Tapestry Institute. She knew in high school that she wanted to be an attorney. She read the book Helter Skelter about the Manson murders and wanted to be a prosecutor and help crime victims, that's amazing. She thought the prosecutor's ability to figure out Manson's motives was amazing. In the early years, she gained a wealth of interesting experience. Her life then took an unexpected turn, and she left the law for 15 years to work for a nonprofit, Tapestry Institute. Tapestry was founded by a Choctaw scientist and educator, and they do work with Indigenous knowledge and with Indigenous worldviews. And because funding can be hard for nonprofits, about 5 years ago, Jo decided to open a virtual law firm, way ahead of her time, to do nonprofit work and also be financially stable and sustainable. She now practices law entirely at her virtual firm, Windhorse Legal, and she also recently started doing legal education at Tapestry about indigenizing environmental law. She knew that she didn't want to have a law firm based on the adversarial system. She had worked too long in the nonprofit world and with Indigenous people. She didn't want to go back to that Western culture model that pits people against each other. It's too exhausting in so many ways, and so many people agree with that. It's exhausting financially, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and spiritually. She's a lifelong horsewoman of more than 45 years now, and she's been an equine professional for more than 20. She decided to combine her horse experience with her legal skills and knowledge so that she could practice preventative equine law and hopefully help horse people before problems arose. She doesn't do any litigation. And she says she has a great pleasure and honour of gentling those wild mustangs. They're amazing horses. So welcome to the broadcast, Jo. It's so amazing to have you here. It's such an unusual perspective in law, bringing the animal kingdom into the human world and dealing with them both together. And this is absolutely extraordinary. I love it. So yes, you were inspired by the Manson murders. Into the idea of becoming an attorney. So please do tell me a little bit about your journey from there into law.
Well, thank you for having me. I am coming from the traditional lands of the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and the Lakota here in the way northwestern corner of Nebraska. And it was true. In high school, I knew I wanted to be an attorney, and then I don't know what possessed me to read Helter Skelter. I was an avid reader, and I read that book, and Vince Bugliosi came up with the amazing motive to get Charles Manson and his associates convicted. And it basically came down to Manson thought there was going to be a race war and that African Americans were going to win, but he was a racist and didn't think they were smart enough to run the world, so that Manson and his group would emerge literally from their secret hiding place and run the world. And he put that together and got the conviction. And I read that and thought, wow, that's fascinating to be able to do that and to help these crime victims, because the Manson murders were they were tragic, they were brutal. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I really want to help people. And many years later, I actually took criminal profiling training and thought, oh, that's what I would have done if it had been around, because that's some of what he was doing. It's very psychological. And I went to college, I went to Boston College, got a degree in psychology, because I wanted to be able to really reach the jury and talk to them about what's going on. You know, my heart was really with crime victims, but the DA's office wasn't hiring when I graduated law school. They had a hiring freeze, and I had been a student prosecutor. I had done all the mock trials and just had loved it. And I was an intern with the Boston Police Legal Office, and they said, "We'd love it to have you. We really want you." I'm like, "Okay, I'll take the job, whatever." And it was an amazing prosecuted officers after internal affairs cases were sustained. I also represented officers in depositions, so they didn't give over crime, secret crime investigative techniques. I worked with the movie Blown Away, with the X-Files, so they could use the police logo. I went into district court because you have to have a license to carry a firearm in Massachusetts. So it was all this mixture. Here I am, fresh out of law school, 25 years old, 10 days after being sworn into the bar, and I'm in court getting yelled at by a judge saying, "No, you're not going to be able to keep that record." I'm like, "Oh, I love this job." But it really was. It was great experience, and I met great people, and it was really high stress. So I stayed there a few years, and then I went into legal editing because I really loved law enforcement. And so I wrote basically 6 law enforcement publications. I took cases, and my cat is going to make an appearance, just so you know. She's right here.
I love cats.
Yeah, she has to say, she's like, "Hi."
Hello. What's her name?
So her name is Soraya. She's about 15, and I have her sister Maya, who will not make an appearance. So I went into legal editing, where I was able to take cases and write them so anyone could understand them. So I would break them down, and that was interesting, but not compared to being a litigator. So during that time period, I actually learned about Tapestry Institute and Dawn Adams, who formed it. And I started talking to her and said, "Wow, you're doing fascinating work. And I don't want to go into law just to practice law. To me, that's boring. And I'm kind of past the DA's office thing. And I don't want to do legal editing anymore." And so she said, "Well, why don't you come work for us? We always have some paperwork that has to be done that I don't understand, that a lawyer will." And I said, "Yeah, let's try that. I want to see what it's like. And I can use my psychology, because I loved psychology. I still do to this day." And so in 2001, 20 years ago this summer, I actually left Massachusetts, Texas, and went ahead and retired my law license. And that was a huge culture shock. From Massachusetts to Texas was I loved it, but boy, was it was very different. And then I went ahead and worked for Tapestry, and I still do work for Tapestry. And we've been all over the place. We had a ranch in this area that had a catastrophic wildfire, and we had to leave because of the financial consequences of that. And I've done a lot of fun stuff with Tapestry too. I've worked with horses, I've gentled mustangs, and now I'm doing a law program there. And then, as I said, 5 years ago, being a nonprofit has really been hard since the crash of 2008. And there were a lot of nonprofits that just folded. And we have done other work to keep us going. But I said, I'm a lawyer. Why don't I go ahead and just open a law firm? Yeah, like that's just easy, which, it's easy to open it, but to keep it going is a whole other matter. But I said, let me get back into law. And, that way we don't have to worry about these grants that take 9 months or 2 years to get. And so unique with what we do, we don't fit into a lot of the places to even get grants. And so that's why I went back into law after 15 years. And when I started looking around, I said, I'm not going back into court. I'm not doing that thing where you stand in court and an attorney yells at you because they're unhappy, that you're winning the case, or they're trying to one up you. I didn't want to do any of that. I had enough of that at the police department. And so that's why I said, let me just do a virtual law firm and just do transactional law, no litigation.
Yeah, it seemed to me that when you started out, you're really doing the psychology. You wanted to bring the humanity into the system.
Yes.
Rather than the fight, rather than the point scoring and all that type of thing, because that's really keeping the human out. And I think it's really amazing how you transitioned from bringing the human in at the beginning and then shifting into horse law. That's just amazing. It's sort of like ahead of where most lawyers are at now, are even trying to bring the human in. You've gone the next level. You've gone next level and really stepped into nature to try and bring some semblance of intelligence and compassion into nature.
Yes, when I started with Tapestry, I said I want to do work with horses. So I did a lot of research on the horse-human relationship, and we do everything with an Indigenous worldview, which is very different than Western worldview. And you see animals differently, and so I look at them with their sentience, but also with their sapience. They're teachers. When I've been a horse professional now for 20 years, I've done clinics for fearful riders, I've done riding instruction, I've trained horses, and when I do it, it's out of that place of the horse can be a teacher, and you're relating. So how can you reach that horse? And you're not going to become a horse, and they're not going to become a human, but where's that space in between where you can understand what's going on? And mindfulness, for example, has been a huge thing that I've used with horses, because when you're mindful, you do enter one of those spaces. And when I knew I wanted to be a professional for 20 years, I've run a horse business, I've worked at a barn, I've been an office manager, a barn manager, a clinician. I mean, I've done all of this. And of course, I'm a private horse person. So I thought this makes perfect sense. I can help with businesses, estate planning, contracts. I can look at your contract and go, oh no, I know every bad scenario. I've been at the barn where the little girl is behind the little pony digging out the hoof going, that's liability right there. It's hard being a horse professional, turning off the attorney voice going, no, I'm not the attorney here. But it really helps me, because when I talk to those clients, they'll say to me, there's something called a pre-purchase exam, PPE. Well, last year, everybody heard PPE and went, oh, COVID. And it's like, no, in the horse world, PPE is totally different. And I can talk to people about that. They can come tell me what their issues are, and I already know them. And I've always seen the law, I think, as a really human-based profession. I don't like all the arguing people get into, posturing, and I can do it. I was a very good litigator, but I don't like it when I have to do it. And so one of my law school friends said, why aren't you doing litigation? You're really good at it. I said, I don't like it. It makes me sick, and my clients, they don't get anything out of it. I mean, there's a place for litigation. There are certain areas, but in high school, my first horse was killed due to the negligence of someone, and we went to court. That was my first equine law case, actually, and we lost. And I still remember the trauma of losing. It was just reigniting that trauma all over again. So when people come to me and say, I had a horse and so, leased the horse and the horse died or whatever, I want to sue them, I say, okay, step back a minute. Because one, it's going to take forever now because the courts are backed up. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and emotionally, it's going to tear you up. So what do you want out of this? And a lot of times they just want a letter sent saying, this happened to me and it was wrong, and are you going to make it right? And then they feel like they've been heard. They've said something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. It's just a question of the human wants to be heard. And I don't think, as you say, it makes you sick. It's like, what is the win? What is winning? What is that? Effectively, what is the idea of winning? There's no in me, because maybe from an Indigenous perspective, it's all whole, it's all oneness, all connected.
Yeah.
So how do you win against yourself? It's a very interesting perspective. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the Indigenous perspectives that you're bringing in.
So what I've done recently, and I just started this about last fall, all of a sudden this grew organically from what we do. And I've always been marginally interested in environmental law. I was born, my birthday's on Tuesday, so I was born right at the height of the beginning of environmental law. And so I started reading it. I've read Wild Law, and I'm reading about the rights of nature. And as I read it, as I've been reading it, what came to me is Indigenous worldview is missing, because the land itself is alive. And that is something that is not recognized in the Western legal system at all in any way, shape, or form. In Indigenous worldview, it is alive. It doesn't make it better. It's alive. It's all about relationship and reciprocity. And these past environmental laws had a place, but it's not making anything any better. We're losing species. climate change is getting worse. We need to bring in that indigenous perspective. We need to bring in, what does it mean when the land is alive? And if you're going to give nature rights, what does that actually mean? Who's going to, quote, speak for the river? I know Indigenous people that can go on the land and they do ritual and ceremony and they do hear things from the land. They are in relationship. But how do we bring that to the legal community? Because what we're doing isn't working. And if it's not working, we have got to find something else. And the box we're in, it's not going to get us there. So we've got to really move outside the box, which lawyers don't like to do, but we've got to move outside that box. And, joining Tapestry and coming into Indigenous worldview, I am not Indigenous to North America. I am European. So I use the phrase that Sean Wilson came up with, an indigenist, like a man can be a feminist. I'm an indigenist. And we're all Indigenous European millennia back. I had to come from Western worldview into Indigenous worldview. And of course, I'm still in Western worldview when I practice law. But how could Indigenous worldview inform environmental law? What would it mean to indigenize environmental law? What does it mean to recognize Indigenous rights? We've seen a little bit of it with restorative justice because that came out of an Indigenous worldview where people all sit around and the person who has done the crime has to realize what he's done or she's done to the community. You've got to realize everybody is affected by that. Well, if we're looking at indigenizing environmental law, what's it mean if the land is alive, really alive? What do we do?
Yeah.
Rights of nature and all talks about, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, this book, I don't know whether you've seen that.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. That's by an Australian Aboriginal, Tyson Yunker Porter. He talks about closed systems and open systems. So nature is the open system. And so there's some beautiful work in here. And something like the law, or what second peoples have created, not the first peoples. The first peoples create open systems. The second peoples, they've created closed systems. And, of course, the closed system are subject to the second law of thermodynamics, which says, that the energy will become stale effectively. Yeah. It breaks down because it cannot flow. And, this is, I think, the fundamental shift that the legal system needs to understand is the whole system is stagnant. It does not flow, so it cannot expand, it cannot grow. And it's actually, I feel, imploding because it's not doing... it doesn't relate anymore to people. I think we're expanding beyond it energetically. And as you're bringing in the idea of Indigenous views, I think it's absolutely beautiful. No matter where we come from, we can look at other cultures and the way things are done and being done. It's like food. It's like, oh, I like what you're cooking. Right. Can I try that? Yeah. It's like, let's share everything. Let's bring in ideas that are different and give us a new perspective. So that book is amazing.
Well, and a lot of it being done, Canada, especially in BC and Victoria, they're doing Indigenous law, which is looking at the stories that, because Indigenous people have law, but the law comes from the land. Everything comes from the land. It's not coming from the human mind. So what are you learning from the land? So Indigenous law in Canada is huge. Australia is doing great. Aotearoa, New Zealand is doing great. US, not so great. And we are stuck in that patriarchal system of, human creates law and this is how it is, but it's not working. And we have to find a new way, and bringing this in and at least opening people's eyes. I don't think that I'm going to be the one that changes the law or anything like that, but to at least bring this to people so they know there's another way. I've read your book, Kiss All the Lawyers, which I think is fantastic because it shows people, look at all this other stuff that's out there. I mean, I had no idea that I could do this kind of legal work when I left the police department. I mean, starting then, but it wasn't big. There weren't any virtual law firms because that was like 97, a long time ago. But when I came back into law, all of a sudden I found holistic law, preventive law, and I went, wow, look at this. There are all these lawyers that are bringing who they are to the practice. And one of the biggest compliments I get, my pictures on my website, either I've taken them or they're from Adobe or something, but they're mostly animals. Most of the horses are mine, and my profile picture is me and one of my Mustangs, Reboot. And
love that
people,
picture.
people contact me and they're like, I saw your picture and I knew I could talk to you. And I'm like, yeah, I can put on the suit. I have all the experience. I can talk all legal jargon, but I want to make law accessible to people so that they're not afraid. Because how many times have we heard somebody say, I know I need an estate plan, but I'm really afraid to talk about it. Yeah. Or, I know I should form a business, but I'm afraid. And it's like, just talk to me. There's no stupid question. You don't have the law degree. I do.
Yeah.
If I don't know it, I'll go look up. So I think it's bringing humanity to law. And then I decide I'm going to try and take it further. Let's go ahead and bring Indigenous worldview to law and see where do we go with that? Because who knows what could emerge, especially as more voices come in. Rights of nature was nowhere on the radar when I practiced law. I mean,
that's amazing.
We had Christopher Stone had written about, should trees have standing, but that had pretty much been like, yeah, that's just kind of silly. That'll never happen. But, women didn't used to have rights to vote and all of that. And so where can we go? And at the same time, with the way Indigenous worldview works, we're not privileging anybody. It's not privilege. It's relationship and reciprocity. So I think that can go a long way to how we interact with other people, and how we interact with ourselves.
That's it. We are not in a vacuum. We are not an individually closed system. We exist in relationship to other people, and this is why, and animals and the state and the earth. We are in relationship to all of that, and we seem to forget that part. We want to just sort of isolate ourselves from that perspective, which I think is really odd. When it's obvious to me, but then with what you just said, it is more people are coming into this space, and we here, you and I and so many other lawyers we know that are in this space are making the difference because it's becoming more commonplace. And as that shifts, it's like we like to call it as like the non-smoking movement. At first, the non-smokers were the pariahs; they were uncool. Like, what are you doing not smoking over there? And now it's just like, people looking like, oh, actually, you seem to be looking a bit better. and so people are thinking, maybe I'll try non-smoking and see what that's like. And then we all basically became non-smokers, and there's still some smokers there, and they're doing their thing, and that's fine. Yeah. But I think this is what's happening, and it will gather more and more momentum the more and more of us that are talking about it and bringing our own flavour. Because there's not one rule about it. It's just all the flavor of it.
Yeah, and really opening up the law, because it's not that static system where everybody wears their suit and goes into court and acts that way. I mean, that doesn't work for a lot of women I know. How many women do we know that are in the law profession and they leave? I mean, that was me. I was like, I'm out of here. This does not work for me. And now I can do it my way, so that it serves me, and that actually serves my clients. There are clients who they want the big firm, they want the suits, but there are so many that are like, that's not what I want. I want someone who isn't going to talk down to me, who I know is a professional, but is also a real person. And I had, working with Indigenous people, I saw that relationship. It's not about being in a stuffy office or anything. It's about relating and being humans and saying, how can we help each other, the best way possible, because we're all in this together, and movements do take a long time. I mean, UVic, after 14 years, they're now getting like an actual Indigenous Law Center.
Okay.
So, where can
I think the movements are, they're getting traction now. I think that more than ever, I think the energy is moving in that direction. And I think it's who likes litigating? Who really enjoys it. It's like maybe a rush for some people to get the win, but it's also disappointing to get the loss. So that's a different game. It's not actually the law, really in the litigation part. It's a different game. It's a game with people rather than looking in the best interest of our clients. And the thing is, what is missing is, as you just said, perhaps in the bigger firms, is people aren't listening to their client. They're telling them, they're parenting them. And this is what we're saying in the legal system is it's a parent, and it's telling you what will happen to you. And when you get into the system, you have no control over, you don't have a say, you just have to listen and just get the result that you're given at the end of the day. And that's been my experience. And I think, yes, our clients would prefer primarily to be heard. How can
Yes.
you help me? How can we work together to improve this situation? How can we look at this, what I brought to the table here,
Yeah.
my life?
Yeah. Yeah. I have
Yeah.
some people that contact me for animal law. Cat goes to the vet, something happens, the vet, the cat dies, and oh, I want to sue my vet, or, it's like, well, let's just look at this. Let's look at the bigger picture. Or, I want to contact you because I figured you wouldn't make fun of me. You would understand.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
reading the email crying myself because I've lost animals. I
Yeah.
mean, at my age, I've had a lot of animals in my life, and I can feel them. I can feel that empathy, and say, yeah, here's the empathy part. I feel you. Here's what the legal thing is. Do you really want to do that? If you're going to go litigation, I can't help you. But what can we do to kind of maybe help that trauma a little bit?
Yeah.
Kind of get the trauma out of your system.
Yeah, that's it. We know hurt people hurt people's. It's like, I'm hurting, I want you to hurt like me, rather
Yes.
than saying, why am I actually hurting?
Yeah.
Asking that
Yeah.
question. Let's look at why you're hurting. And some people would say, oh, that's being a psychologist or what have you, and that's not in the scope of the legal profession, but it should be.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
are dealing with humans and their emotions and their
Yeah.
relationship to
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and we're
and it's not
counselors.
really, yeah, that's it. It's not rocket science. It's just
No.
listening. As Freud said, listening is healing. Listen, just
Yes.
listen. And people will often heal themselves by their story. When you just ask the
Yeah.
question, well, how are you feeling?
Well, and
Probably not many people have been asked that question. As you know, the criminals, people really entrenched in the criminal system, no one cares how they feel.
Yeah. 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 And there's even a therapy, narrative therapy, where you write out what's going on. What's your story? So many people want to tell their story, and they do. They want somebody to listen. They want somebody and somebody to really listen, not to just say, yeah, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. They want to have that connection and say, oh, well, at least I know that someone heard me. And it's like, yeah, that to me is important. I know that rush of litigation. I know that feeling of, yes, I won, but I also have that feeling of, yes, I lost. And you're right about that adrenaline rush. And I can still feel that, but then I have to step back and go, there's going to be a down afterwards. And the client's going to have a down, because no amount of money is going to replace that horse or that dog, and is it really going to be worth it for them? And if they realize that, then they can let that anger go. They can let that trauma go, because that trauma is held in the system. And Bessel van der Kolk has a fantastic book. I have it on my desk, The Body Keeps the Score, that talks about trauma. And it's this book. It's very good. And, one of the main things about trauma is, can you talk about it after it happens? Or do you have to hold it in and not tell anybody, which a lot of victims of abuse do? So if you've had a trauma of an animal dying or being injured or something, can you talk to somebody about it? And in that counseling, in that talking, saying, what could I do? What am I doing? A lot of what I hear with the animals and horses and all are, what am I doing because of that animal? I let my animal down. Well, if you can talk to someone and say, okay, this is the best I can do, then they can let that go. Because we all have that. An animal dies, and it's like, did the animal know how much I loved that animal? And of course they did. They're animals. But to be able to talk to an attorney who says, yes, I understand, that to them is just, I've had somebody say, oh, I'm crying and I'm this. I'm like, well, I don't want you to cry, but I understand, because, I do understand what you're going through, unfortunately. But
and that is the thing, isn't it? What you say, your body holds on to all the emotion, and emotion is energy in motion, and we need to keep it flowing. And instead of reacting and having someone fight for us, stand up and yell at somebody for our problems, we need to experience it ourselves until we do. I relate it to like going for the chocolate. Just like you get that temporary relief, but then it goes straight to the thighs. It's like, why did I do that? Because it made me feel good to do that for a moment, but it doesn't get rid of the underlying, feeling, that negative feeling that I'm not experiencing myself, and I do need to experience it and accept it in my life because it's who I am.
Yeah, we tend to push a lot of that away. We don't want to feel it because we don't know what to do with it. And, I actually tell my clients, sometimes I'm the person that holds that anxiety too. You file a trademark, you don't know if you're going to get it. Well, I can let that anxiety go through me, whereas a client can't. And and being able to know what it is, to sit with it. I mean, I do meditate, and I've studied Buddhism, and,
Yeah.
what does it mean to experience that, and how do you handle it? And I really do think that a lot of clients just want an attorney to listen, to truly listen, to know that they're
Because
being heard.
the trauma comes in the conflict. You go to the lawyer
Yeah.
with the conflict. This is the trauma on a plate. Here, help me with the trauma, not with attacking somebody for the trauma. And I think that's the fundamental difference that we could bring. And it's, you're doing that. I'm doing that. It's just there's quite a few of us doing that now, and realizing that this is where the human element comes into it, and the connection with humanity is brought back, and we're unifying people rather than separating them.
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful. So we're about out of time. So I'd like you, if you can, to give the listeners, any lawyers out there that are wanting to sort of share a little bit more about what they're doing, what's your one tip that you would say to someone to bring a little bit more love into legal practice?
I would say to really reach down inside yourself and find out what is unique about yourself and what brings you joy, that then you can meld with the law. Because too many people are practicing law, they hate it, it's not what they want. They think they're going to find happiness somewhere else. And I have to say from experience, you've got to find out who you are, and then you're going to bring that to whatever you do. Doesn't matter what you do, the law, gentling horses, anything, it's going to come out. It's been a hard journey for me, but that's what I've learned. And I think as attorneys, we're not taught that in law school, and we need to find that. And whether you find that through reading, through meditating, through a therapist, however, find out who are trained to what you do, and then just craft your law firm the way you want. Yeah. Do the law the way you want to do it.
You have a choice. You have a choice to be authentic or not. And that's it. And I think that's where the happiness really lies, as being you, I believe. So that is an amazing tip. I love that. And you're living proof of it. So thank you so much, Jo. And I just want to say to any lawyers out there that are listening that want to come on the show and show us their particular style of love in legal practice, we'd love to have you. Their connection to us is in the description box below. Thank you so much, Jo, for coming on the program. I really absolutely love what you do. It's so unusual and so inspirational for a lot of people out there. So thank you so much. And we will see you all again soon. Take good care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.